Hello and welcome back to Settlement Nation podcast. It's me, your favorite podcast host from Down Under, Courtney Barber. Today I have with me not only a friend, but a great trial lawyer out of New York City, Arkady Frekhtman from Frekhtman and Associates. You've probably seen him on your YouTube or listened to him on his podcast, Trial Stories. Arkady and his firm have been able to recover over $900 million for their clients and have received some of the top verdicts and settlements in New York State history, also rated in the top 10 PI firms in the state. He is here today hoping to share some of his great techniques he's been using to effectively grow his practice and get amazing results for his clients. So welcome, Arkady.
Oh, good morning. How are you? Yeah, it's great to be here. It's absolutely great. Great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here. Now, I was speaking to someone in my office yesterday, and I was saying, it's kind of like, I don't know if you're a comic book fan, but it's like the metaverse and the multiverse joining. It's two worlds coming together, your big podcast and marketing and PI following and the Settlement Nation community, which is kind of fun. So I like to start off with a random question every time we do a show. If you could be one comic book character, Arkady, for a week, who do you think you would want to be?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess if I could be a comic book character, maybe I would choose Superman, just because it's pretty cool. He's kind of like Superman to the point that he could fly, he could stop a moving train, and he just has all these powers, and he helps others, helping other people, because that's kind of like what I love to do, helping others. So yeah, maybe Superman.
I see that. I definitely see that. And I think he's a god, like a half god or something. So he's basically invincible. I think I would be Catwoman. I do love jewelry. Not that I think I'd want to break into any stores and steal them, but I think that would be fun to be climbing over buildings at night and causing a bit of havoc for people. So, okay, so that's cool. All right, we got that done. So first off, for people who don't know you, Arkady, just share a bit about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was born in Russia. I was born in Moscow, and I came over to New York City when I was 5 years old. So I grew up in New York City. And basically, at an early age, maybe like in middle school, I was always interested in law, like constitutional law, criminal justice. I remember taking a class in high school about criminal justice, and I was always fascinated by that. And then I became a lawyer, and I went to law school down in Texas, University of Texas at Austin, and I'm admitted there as well. Then I just came back to my roots in New York and opened up. First, I worked for a firm for about 2-3 years. Then I opened up my own small firm. It was just me, and my dad actually was helping me, just the two of us. And it was almost like we just had a room in a larger accounting office, just a room, and we started there. And I still remember our first case. It was actually for a neighbor. She was defrauded by her life insurance company, and we wrote a letter and we made a demand, and they said, you know what, we're going to offer you $12,000. So we got that check, and I thought, wow, this is amazing, because now my legal fee is $4,000. It was just so much money to me. I was like, wow, this is great. And I helped her because she was being defrauded, and then we did a few small car crash cases, things like that. So it just kind of took off from there, and now we're a little bit bigger. And we have about 20 employees. We have about 7 lawyers altogether. So that was, it was a nice growth since about 1999 when we started the firm.
Wow, that's super interesting. And actually, I wanted to bring that up because a lot of the new lawyers that listen to the show, I think they feel the pressure to start their own firm like right out of the gate. And you began, as you said, working for a big personal injury firm in Manhattan, getting the experience of like writing motions and going to court. Why do you think it was actually a great start for you to have that experience before you went out on your own?
Yeah, no, that's very important because it gives you the foundation. So I think it's hard to just go off on your own right from the very, very beginning, because like, for example, for me, when I was working in that firm, they taught me everything, like how to handle a court appearance. And it was trial by fire. They would just kind of throw you in there. They would say, hey, go to federal court and handle this bankruptcy, you have to lift the bankruptcy stay. And I was like, I've never even been to federal court. I'm not even admitted in federal court. They're like, that doesn't matter. Just go there. And then they would teach me how to, well, they actually were a little bit more old school. The way they just had like files on all the computers, but now I'm sure there's more updated systems with case management software and things like that. But they gave me samples for motions, all types of motions, and then you would just see by working so much and by doing so many different tasks, you would just start to see how everything works from the client intake to the complaint to the going to court and the motions and fighting with the defense lawyers or working things out, negotiating with them, and there's everything. And so, yeah, they get and they would give me a lot of depositions. So that pretty much it was a good experience. It was really like trial by fire. They just threw me in there. But and there was also a more senior lawyer who would do their trials. So I became friends with him, and I would go to court with him. I would watch him. So it was a great experience.
And I think that's really important what you said, because a lot of lawyers, they might have been working for years and never even gone to court. And you got that, as you said, trial by fire, just right in there, at the beginning. So I want to kind of start, Arkady, at the beginning of the life cycle of a case, which is client acquisition. And for a lot of people who don't know, Arkady and his associates have already recovered over $150 million for their clients this year. So there's probably some people listening that think, your results speak for yourself. Why do you have to keep marketing? Shouldn't there just be cases coming? You should have so many cases. You don't have to do anything. But, why is it so important that you have to keep marketing and putting yourself out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that marketing is just really important because that's the way that you get cases. So, I mean, basically, like as a lawyer, as a law firm, you have to be able to get cases because that's like the lifeblood of the firm and how you make money, but also how you keep everyone working, all your staff and your entire team. So, but for me also like marketing in the last few years, I think it shifted because before when I first started, I thought of it as just like get as many cases as you can, let's just get cases. But now I'm thinking of it differently because I feel like I'm not able to handle like every single case. And some of the cases maybe are better suited to be handled by other lawyers because somebody is a specialist in a particular area, or maybe the case is too small for me, or I just can't give it the attention that that client deserves because I can't be overwhelmed. So now I'm thinking more about marketing in a way that's more of a niche marketing that's getting the client, almost like the client avatar, right? The client avatar that I want. And then, for example, like I'm getting some cases that involve traumatic brain injury. And so I'll start doing either YouTube videos or website articles, blogs, or podcasts about traumatic brain injury. And then I'm getting some of those clients. And the same thing for maybe like trucking accidents or spinal fusions, things like that. And then I noticed that you don't have to rank for something like personal injury lawyer or accident lawyer. For example, I'll give you a funny example. I was so surprised by this. I started ranking for this term, ceiling collapse lawyer. And I thought, like, ceiling collapse lawyer, that no one's even going to search that. But then in one weekend in New York City, I got 8 calls, and there were 8 ceiling collapses in the Bronx and Queens and Manhattan. And all 8 were actually pretty good cases with serious injuries, some of them very serious injuries, because I was like number 1 on Google for that somehow. And so you could get 8 calls in one weekend. So,
I love that. It sounds like quality over quantity now is kind of what you're aiming for. And on that point of YouTube, I've definitely looked at some of your videos. I love them. Why has that been so successful in reaching people by using stuff like YouTube?
I think people just enjoy, listening to a lawyer who's a little bit different. I feel like a lot of lawyers on YouTube will do that little 30-second commercial just saying, have you been injured? Call me. I could get you, I could get you money, or, I'll stick it to the insurance company. I'm the bulldog or whatever slogan. But I'm a little different. I just kind of talk to them more relatable. And I think that in my heart, I really want to help the injury victim. So I'll even give them my cell phone number, and then people will text me, and I try to get back to people. So I've done consultations with people like all over the country, in Louisiana, in California, in There was one case in Mississippi, another one near Atlanta, Georgia, that was actually very successful. He needed a lawyer, and I found him a lawyer that is very good for truck accidents, and he ended up recovering $2 million. And then, of course, if it's in New York, if I can handle it, I will, or I could refer it to someone else in New York. So I always try to think of the client, think of their journey, and think of what they would want to hear about, what they would want to learn about, and also answering a lot of their questions. And it seems like from doing a bunch of videos over the last few years, the number one question is like, how much am I going to get, for my lawsuits? I can't always answer that, but I try to give them all the factors that come into play to determine that, and just try to be receptive to them. And I even started this segment where I'll read their comments, either recorded, they'll leave written comments on my YouTube. So I'll read their comments and I'll try to answer their comments. And I call it Last Week Tonight, like answering their questions. And I've even started doing it live. And live has been working pretty well because we get about 25, 30 people usually watching at any one time. And then people will start asking questions and you start answering them live right on the program. So it's good. I try to just give them what they want, basically.
Yeah, I like these ideas. It's super clever. Speaking of that, there's different avenues people can, pay to play, basically paid advertising versus kind of what you're doing, which is organic social media, but also it's really client, like value focused. What have you experienced to be most effective based on both, or have you only kind of done organic versus paid?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like paid definitely works, like the pay per click. If you target the right keywords, maybe the niche keywords that are a little bit more long tail for your specific niche. So you could maybe target something like Uber or commercial vehicle or a truck accident or whatever you're trying to target. And then organic definitely works with the search engine optimization. But again, I would say more of the niche keyword. You have to get a little bit more creative because it's so hard to compete on the accident lawyer, injury lawyer, because everybody's doing that, especially in the big markets like New York City. But then the organic on YouTube has been working well. And I feel it's almost, it does take effort. I record twice a week, but it's almost like effortless in the sense that I enjoy doing it. It's almost like a break. If I'm writing a motion or an appeal or prepping for a trial, then I'll say, let me take half an hour break and record a video. It's almost like a break from the workday, the monotony of it and everything. And at the same time, it does result in pretty good cases. I wouldn't say a large volume of cases, but high quality cases. And sometimes it's brand new cases, and sometimes they're cases where someone's not happy with their lawyer. I try not to take cases from other lawyers. I don't want to do that. But sometimes if the person is really intent on finding someone new, I will take their case. It's only really in New York. But that's one of the things I'm actually struggling with right now is how to change my content so I could attract more of the new cases and not the people that already have cases that are. But I'm not sure how to do that. That's my next project.
For the next episode that we have with you on Arkady, we can cover how you've changed your strategy to get new cases. Speaking of new cases, what is the process that you set out when you take a new client on, starting at the very beginning?
Yeah, so when we get a new client, I like to meet with the client, find out a little bit about their story, do a full intake, and then depending on the type of case, if it's a trip and fall case, I like to go to the scene, take photos, measurements, do a little bit more of a deep dive, and do a lot of the research. In New York City, we have something known as like the DAP portal, where you could get everything like the Housing and Preservation Department complaints, the Department of Building complaints. So you could do a deep dive. And the same thing, if it's a car crash, you could go to the scene, build up the case, make sure that they're getting the right treatment, help them coordinate their medical care. And then, just really get to know a little bit about them as a person and start that relationship so that I could be their guide, not just the lawyer who's kind of like the boring lawyer who's going to do the lawyer work, but almost like a friend. So they can reach out to me, They could text me, they could call me. I give them my cell number, and just almost start a relationship. And it's been working pretty well. It's definitely been working pretty well. And I do the same thing when a case is already on the trial calendar. I'll get to know the client. I'll do Zoom calls with them. I'll go to their house. I'll meet them. And I feel like that's really important to do that, because as a lawyer, you want to be like a conduit for the client's story and being able to tell their story. And I feel like that's what's really going to resonate with a jury. If they see that this is a real human story, then they would allow for much more compensation. If they see, hey, this is just another case, or they think of it as somebody who's asking for money that doesn't necessarily deserve money, or, the whole tort reform mantra, then it's much harder to get significant compensation. So.
And you just mentioned something really important that I do want to touch on. We kind of call it the trial by human method. And the listeners can't see Arkady, but he's wearing a trial by human shirt right now, which is one of our favorite shirts. How important is the human story? Because that is something that I think a lot of people haven't really even thought about until maybe they go to a trial by human and they really see that at work. But this is something that you do with your cases. Let's talk a little bit more about what's involved in really getting to know your client.
Yeah, I think the human story is one of the most important things you can do, because obviously as a lawyer, you're going to do the regular case prosecution, getting all the medical records, hiring the experts, doing everything that you normally do. But when you add the human story to it, you really get to know your client, you get to love them, you get to care about them. And then I feel like their story is almost like burning inside of you. So you don't have to necessarily make a checklist. I'm going to talk about like they can't play basketball, or they can't, they have trouble sleeping, because you just know it. It's almost burning inside of you. Just get up there and it just starts flowing. You become that conduit where you're not really worried about how the jury is going to perceive you, or if you're going to do a good job, because it's just in you. It's just natural. And the other thing about it is when you take time to really learn the human story, it can be the best way to counter the defense arguments. Like, for example, I just did a trial in February, and it was a case for a young girl. She was 13 years old, and she cut her leg playing in the grass. There was a broken, jagged pipe, and she only had 3 or 4 hospital visits over the course of, I would say, many, many years. So one of the defense's arguments was, well, look, if she was really that hurt, how come she didn't go to the doctor very much? But then when I went and I found out her human story, and this took maybe 5 or 6 times meeting with her, because they're not going to share this all at once. But after the 5th or 6th meeting, she shared with me that she was living alone with her mother because her father was an alcoholic, and her father moved out of the household. And then, unfortunately, the mother then decided she was going to find a boyfriend. So then the mother moved out, and some ex-boyfriend was the only person living there. And then she was living with that ex-boyfriend. So this girl who was 13 is not going to be able to navigate making appointments. Given that situation, having to go to high school and living with some strangers, she's not going to be able to make appointments. So when I said that in opening statement to the jury, I just saw the look in their eyes. They were really touched by that. They were really moved. And it was a beautiful explanation of why she didn't have enough medical care. So even though she had a scar, and then she had what are the beginning signs of the CRPS, the complex regional pain syndrome, and the defendant thought this is a case worth $25,000. It's a small 2-inch scar. And then we ended up getting a verdict of $535,000 for her. So I feel like if without the human story, it would have been more of like a $25,000 case. So it really makes a huge difference.
It really does. And something else that you do, which, I know a lot of lawyers kind of in the circle that you work in probably do this, but other people don't. You actually go to your clients' homes when you can and spend time with them. And then, on the reverse, they will come and meet with you too. But why is it so important to get to see where they come from and really, meet with them at their home?
I think it's just invaluable, because when you go to their home, you always learn something new. And I'll give you 2 examples. There was one client who just had a simple, I mean, she had a fracture in her spine from a car crash, a pedestrian knockdown, but she never had any kind of surgery, and they were also lowballing the case. They were trying to settle it for 30 or something like 30,000. And when I went to her home, I found out that she did not sleep in the same room with her husband of 40 years. She had to sleep in a different room because of the way the house was configured, and she needed this special bed that would be on an incline, and she would have to sleep at a 45-degree angle because of that injury. And so I would have never known that had I not gone to her home. And I think, and using that, we were able to get that case, I think, forced to settle for over $500,000 instead of the small amount that they offered. And this case that I'm working on now, I thought I knew everything about it, but just from reading the medical records, it's just not enough. By going to the client's home, you learn things. Like, for example, you see that this particular client's, his kitchen was completely pristine. Like, his oven was never opened, his fridge just has water. And the reason is because he's not able to cook because he had a severe back injury with radiculopathy going to his hand and partial paralysis of his hand. So he's just not able to use his hand to do any of these things. So you see that, and it really hits you very viscerally and very visually when you go to their homes. I think that's something that every lawyer should do.
I think that's very important. Another question for you based on cases is, how do you personally value your injury cases? Like, what are the things that you look for when you're trying to accurately do this?
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess I look to a few different factors. I mean, sometimes I do a jury verdict search to see what has been sustained in my jurisdiction, past precedents. I look to the overall injury. I look to the venue. I look to the type of client, whether they would be likable. And then, of course, a big factor is the liability. Sometimes you have to discount the ultimate damages. Like, for example, you might have a case that you think would be worth $1 million, but because of the liability, you may lose on liability, it may be weaker, so you have to discount it that way. So it's kind of all of these factors. It's kind of hard to say, but I try to keep it. I try to keep it as high as possible. I always try to keep it as high as possible, whether I'm doing a settlement opportunity letter where I say, look, this is the number we would accept, and if you don't provide this number, then we're going to go to trial, but then the amount will be much, much higher. Of course, I learned it from the Running with the Bulls book, which I love. I have to read that again. I think I read it 3 times already, but every time I read that book, I learned something new. So I have to maybe visit it again. But I would just say it's almost like being a chef and cooking like a beautiful meal, a beautiful dish. There's so many ingredients, there's so many factors, but I feel like valuing the cases is really important. And I always try to start as high as possible and always get what I call full justice for the client at the absolute maximum for them.
And on full justice for the client, obviously there's a lot of factors that come into play with this, so it's not just one thing, but how do you decide whether to take a case all the way through to trial or do a settlement?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what I like to do is when I get the case in the beginning, I always think of it that it's going to go all the way to trial. So I always like to think of that right from the beginning. So we have the pattern jury instructions here in New York. So I like to read those pattern jury instructions, even photocopy them or print them out from Westlaw or Lexis and put them right in the file to know, hey, this is what I have to prove, and start building the case for trial. And I feel like when you build the case for trial from the very beginning, then the defendants and the insurance companies see that, and then that makes them more likely to want to settle with you because they see that you're serious. They see that you're going you're fearless. You're going for the trial, and it could be a big number against them. So then they're more often to provide you with a good faith offer, say let's go to mediation, and settle the case.
I've never heard that before about putting the jury instructions in your trial prep folder. I think that is such a great bit of advice that you've just shared. But now we're on to actual trial. I have a couple questions for you. What are some things that you do that prepare you for success when you are going to trial?
Yeah, I mean, like basically, I like to prepare, and there's a lot of different types of preparation. I mean, of course, there's the making the trial notebook, going through all the medical records, meeting with the client. I feel like meeting with the client is really important, just meeting over and over again, because like I said, with that other case, like it wasn't until the sixth or seventh meeting that I found out that critical piece of information. And if I would have stopped at like the fourth meeting, which is still a lot of prep, that would have never gotten there to that little golden nugget of information. So I feel like just keep pushing, do as much as you can, and really just of course like line up all your witnesses and think of your themes. But I feel like often the same themes keep coming up, and a lot of the resources out there, whether it's from Trial by Human or Trial Lawyers University, or there are a lot of excellent books from trial guides. I feel like a lot of the themes come up. Like one of the themes that comes up in a lot of my trials is that issue of responsibility or taking accountability. And I feel like in my closing argument, I'm always left saying this defendant says that they care about responsibility or that they took accountability, but they're really not. They're really just pointing the finger of blame at someone else, and they refuse to take accountability. So that's always a recurrent theme. And there are a lot of these recurrent themes that you see in trials. So I think being able to identify them, the more you practice, either preparing for trial or doing trials, the more you kind of see it. So sometimes I'll be sitting there at counsel table taking notes during the trial, and they'll make an argument, and I'll just like, I don't even have to think. It'll just like flow into me. It'll just hit me like, boom, I know what to say to that. It's just almost automatic, because I've like, whether it's like Keith Mitnick's book, Don't Eat the Bruises, or some other book from trial guides. I really like that book, 12 Heroes, One Voice by Carl Bettinger. There's so many, and of course, Nick Rowley's books, Trial by Human and Running with the Bulls. But there are so many like different resources, and then it kind of lets you see the argument right away, which really helps you as a lawyer.
I really like that. So on the eve of trial, if I was going to go to your house and see you prepare, what would be the things sort of in your trial kit or next to the door ready for the next day? Do you have a routine that you like to do to get yourself in the mindset? Do you have certain things that you like, pieces of technology or different stuff that you take with you that really have helped you?
Yeah, definitely. Let me see. So basically, usually on the eve of trial, it'll be jury selection. So for jury selection, I usually just bring a little backpack, and it'll have a trial notebook, but a really thin trial notebook just with my outline for jury selection. Sometimes I'll put it on little 3x5 index cards, and I usually will just remember it, so I won't even hold the index cards. I try to do everything without any notes. Or sometimes I'll type it up. I like to use Google Docs, and I'll just type it up and then print it out and then put it in the trial notebook and then just kind of leave it on the table. So if I forget something, I can walk over and just take a glance. And then, sometimes I'll make slides using one of the softwares, like either Google Slides, because it's just easy, because no matter where you are, you could see it on your phone, you could see it on your iPad, on your laptop. So it's always there. So it's easy to use, and do a little PowerPoint type presentation with slides. Although in New York, sometimes they don't let you use the slides. Like in the last trial, the judge refused to let me use any demonstratives, because New York is a little bit more old school with their rulings, a little bit more, I don't know what's the right word. Maybe they're just, I don't want to say like defense oriented, but for whatever reason, they don't want to let you do as much as the lawyers. Because I watch some trials on CBN and I see what some of the lawyers do out in California and in New York. They don't let us do that. They say, look, you can't use slides, even a simple slide. Like, for example, I wanted to use a slide of shower water in my last case in February, because she had something known as allodynia, which is pain from a non-painful stimuli like shower water. She would get pain in her foot from water. So I said, look, I just had the shower, picture of a shower water. And they said, no, you can't use that because you have to show it's only evidence. We don't know that that's going to come into evidence. They're very, very overly strict and restricted. So I said, okay, fine. And I had a slide that explains how complex regional pain syndrome works. And they said, you can't use that either. So then I said, fine, Judge, I'm not going to use anything. I just got up there and I actually made the jury, like the the situs of her pain, and I made the judge the brain, and I did the same slide, but I did it with the courtroom. I said, look, the pain stabilized goes up to the brain, which is the judge sitting behind the bench, and then the brain sends the pain signal back to the leg, and then I showed how the CRPS works and got all the information from the slide just using the courtroom, which is also something I learned from some of these mentors like Nick Rowley and others. So, and I thought it worked really well because that way the jury's more involved. Like I'm making you guys the pain stimuli. So, it's actually, I think it's more powerful than the slide. But I like to embrace technology. Sometimes I'll use trial pad for depositions, and I'll highlight a certain testimony and kind of it'll pop out, and that's kind of powerful too. So, but I could definitely improve. I could definitely even use more technology, but I'd use as much as they allow me, basically.
And I was going to say, we did chat before about different nuances about being a lawyer in New York City than other places. Do you want to talk a little bit more about some of the differences? Because some of the things that you go through, I think other people would be quite, shocked to hear about the differences.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, New York is a little bit different. I mean, in many respects, it's similar, like the way the trial goes and opening statements. But one of the very big differences was the way that they handle jury selection. And they still do it this way now, but before the pandemic, especially, like I did about 7 jury trials in 2019. And so they would put you, like in Brooklyn, for example, Kings County, they would send you to the basement somewhere, put you in this little closet, almost like, I mean, it's a room, but it's a very small room, maybe like 8 by 8 room. And there would be a fan on the wall. This is in the summertime. The fan would make so much noise and it would rotate, oscillating fan, really old one with like dust in it. And they would close the door. There would be like 20 jurors in there on these plastic chairs. And there would be like one table, like a little table, almost like a folding table, like you would have at a picnic, with some more plastic chairs for the lawyers. And they would say, go ahead and pick your jury. This is your jury selection. No judge, right? It's just the lawyers. So you start your jury selection, you start speaking with them. You try to be as animated, as excited as you can, because everyone's upset that they're here in this room. And then if the defense lawyer feels that something is improper, he'll say, let's step outside, counselor. And then you have to go into the hallway and try to work things out. And you better work it out, because if you don't work it out, then you have to go find not the judge, because the judge isn't going to really even care. You have to find the JHO, which is like a retired judge who's probably like close to into their 90s, but he's somewhere on the, 8th floor of that building in their chambers. So by the time you go and find this JHO, by the time the JHO gives you a ruling, by the time you come back to that jury selection, an hour could pass, right? And meanwhile, all the jurors are just sitting there in that room, they're playing on their phones or whatever, bored. So you try not to argue with the defense lawyer. But in many respects, it's good that you could. But I mean, one of the issues is that, like I said, like a lot of the practices are just antiquated in New York. Like, for example, one trial guides book that I really liked mentioned using like butcher paper and writing down fears. So when you talk to the jury, what should I be afraid of? Tell me. And then the jury will tell you, okay, this is my concern. This is my concern. And you write down the fears on a piece of paper, like an easel with butcher paper during the jury selection. I tried doing that. And then the defense lawyers from the insurance companies, they're basically saying, oh my God, you can't use any props. You can't use anything. There's no markers allowed. There's no paper allowed. So then you have to go see the judge about that. So now I just try to get along, because I feel like, but now they've made it a little better. Since the pandemic has been done, I mean, since after COVID, I've done about 3-4 trials now. And at least they're not putting us in those little rooms anymore. At least they're giving us courtrooms now.
Oh my gosh.
That's better. But still no judge. It's just up to us to work everything out. So.
That makes me laugh so much, what you have to go through. Speaking of trials, you had one in February. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because I know you also have one coming up in May.
Yeah, absolutely. So that case in February, I mentioned a little bit about it. It was the girl, she was 12 years old. She was up in it was like a mobile home park community in the Catskill Mountains. and she was visiting a friend, and they were playing tag at about 10 p.m. at night, and it was very dark in the tall grass. And all of a sudden, she just felt a sharp pain. She looks down and she sees her sneaker covered in blood, and she goes to the hospital. And it turns out that there was a broken pipe in the grass that cut her leg, and then she had a few stitches, and she was pretty much okay. And she had these follow-ups, 2 or 3 visits over the course of a few years, and then maybe I would say 3 or 4 years later, she sees a neurologist because she still has a little bit of pain, and the neurologist says this may be a little bit of allodynia, but he kind of dismisses it. And then she went to another doctor closer to the time of trial, and then that doctor said this could be the onset of CRPS, which is the complex regional pain syndrome. And he did all of this testing, kind of like an EMG type testing. I think it was called sympathetic skin response testing. And he confirmed that there were temperature changes and some of the signs of the CRPS. So, yeah, we presented that case and we tried to settle it. I sent them a running with the bulls letter. I thought I put a really reasonable number in there, and they were just not having it. They had only $1 million policy, and they said, no, 25,000. I think at one point they said, okay, maybe if you take it, we can get you close to 6 figures, like not 100,000, but close, maybe. And we just said no. And we went and we got a verdict. And it was, when the verdict was read, I was a little bit worried because they said past pain and suffering. And they said, what was it? Past pain and suffering. I think they said something like 35,000. So I thought that's pretty low. But then future pain and suffering, they said 500,000 because she was only, I think now she's about 19, and she had 60 years of future pain and suffering living with this injury to her ankle, to her. So I was happy with that result. She was very happy. She wasn't expecting that, so she was just crying tears of joy, and she was a very nice, humble, sweet young lady. So I just felt that's what it's all about, helping injury victims and their families. And so I was really, really happy with that verdict. Yeah.
And tell me about your case. Obviously, we don't want to share too much to give anything away, but you've got a trial coming up in May.
Yes, we have one in May in the Bronx, and this one is against a city agency, against the New York City Transit Authority, and it involves a slip and fall on an icy condition. So, of course, it's going to be all of the typical defenses with slip and falls, that people should watch where they're going and this and that. So, but the injury is very serious. It was a life-changing, forever injury for this young man. He had a major spinal surgery, and then the radiating pain from the neck going down into his arm left his arm partially paralyzed, and he needed a left hand surgery. So I feel like I've met with him a few times already over Zoom, over just phone calls, went to his house. He came to my office, but I just want to do even more to really get a few more layers deep into his story, because I feel like he has so many medical records, thousands and thousands of pages. So I've kind of taken out the important pages and tried to highlight them and put them in a trial binder. But I feel like now it's not really about the medical records, it's more about the human story. So that's what I'm going to focus on. And that one is supposed to start mid-May. So I still have a little bit more time, but it should be exciting. We'll see if they provide a fair settlement, or if not, then I guess we'll have to move forward with that one. But the trials are just so exhilarating. They're so fun. It's almost like now, I mean, I know it's work, but it's just so much fun. I enjoy them.
Well, it means you've definitely found your passion, and just don't take in a, butcher's paper with a marker. Otherwise you might get in trouble. We're nearing the end, Arkady, but I have a couple more questions for you. And you've mentioned so many books in this podcast that you've read and different people that are your mentors. Why is it so important to never stop learning as a trial lawyer?
Yeah, well, they call it the practice of law because you're always practicing, you're always getting better, you're always learning. And I feel like I just have this large appetite to learn more, to always find out more, and to never stop exploring and learning. And I feel like this entire area of both being a trial lawyer and personal injury law and just civil justice is just such an interesting area that there's so much you could learn. And I definitely learn a lot from the books at Trial Guides, from Trial by Human, I'm a member of the American Association for Justice. They have a lot of resources. There's so many groups. There's the American Truck Accident Attorneys. If you're interested in truck accidents, they have amazing webinars. There's the TBI Med Legal. There's just so many resources. Sometimes I can't keep up with all of it, or I'm in a deposition and I'll try to, see if I could watch it later or have someone else in my firm watch it and give me the notes if I can't make it. But I've even gone to a few of the CLEs, and I feel like the best ones have been probably Trial by Human has done some amazing ones, but also there was one that the American Association of Justice did. It was at Harvard Law School. That was a really good one where they did trial techniques and you got to practice, and then the Trial by Human approach is just amazing as well. So I just feel like, that's very important. You just have to always keep learning. And if you have a passion for it, if you want to get better, and then also I feel like mindset is so important, and the way that you frame and the way that you look at things, because a lot of lawyers are just afraid because they think, well, what if I lose? Or what if, they offered me $1 million? I say no, but then what if I get less? But I feel like the best lawyers have this different mindset where they just kind of go for it. Even a tough case, like I was watching a few of these trials on CBN, some of the fact patterns are so tough, but then you see the result and it's like $60 million. How did you get that on that fact pattern? And it's because they're just fearless. And I guess that's what you have to be, and just that's what you have to strive for.
Yeah, I really love that. And you did mention Trial by Human and, of course, Trial Lawyers University, which is a great program that gets put on every year. I think that's where I saw you most recently, was maybe Trial Lawyers University event, possibly last year. We're down to the very last question, Arkady. I can't believe we're already here. And this is going to be hard, so you don't have to answer within the first second, but what is the best advice you've been given by someone else? Maybe it was life advice, maybe it was law advice. What do you think it is?
The best advice. I mean, I guess just to treat others the way that you would want to be treated yourself, just to treat others with compassion and empathy, and kind of to look at the world through their eyes, the world through standing in their shoes. And I think that's good advice, because whether you're dealing with an angry judge, or you're dealing with a hostile juror, or you're dealing with even like with your own spouse or a colleague at work, whoever it is, you have to be able to see the world through their eyes and have that empathy. And I think that's really, really important, because then it stops you from getting angry. It stops you from getting stressed. It allows you to look at the world more constructively as me, not me versus you, but me and you, maybe taking someone's hand and saying, hey, how do we solve this together, as opposed to fighting. So that's always good advice.
I really like that. And it kind of works with I like your tagline, serious lawyers for serious injuries, if I'm correct.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. I really like that. I think that's very clever. Well, Arkady, here's the time where we get to tell all the Settlement Nation listeners how they can listen to trial stories, how they can go on your YouTube, how they can contact you. Maybe they have some cases that they want to refer to you in New York. So tell them how they can get in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could always just text me. That's the 347-566-9595. So that goes right to my cell phone. You could text me or call me. To reach me on the YouTube, I'm at Injury Justice, or just the name of our law firm, which is Frekhtman and Associates. That's our YouTube channel. And then our website is the same as our phone number, which is 866-ATTYLAW.com. So you could go to our website, or you could just call 866-ATTORNEY-LAW, ATTY-LAW, and that's our phone number. And we also have 212-222-1111. So that's one of those easy to remember numbers.
Marketing genius. I love you've covered all the bases. Well, Arkady, thank you so much for coming on the show, and good luck with your trial in May. I can't wait to hear about the results. And I know I'm going to see you very soon. I mean, we're in the same circle. So I'm sure at the next Trial by Human, I'll be seeing you there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I wouldn't miss that. Those are the best.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time. Thank you.